They had always believed that God was listening, that every cry, every prayer, every whisper in the candlelight was heard somewhere beyond the stars. But when the plague came, the bells that once sang for salvation began to toll for death. It started in 1347 and spread like wildfire through the veins of Europe, carried not by armies but by breath. The priests told their people to pray harder, to confess their sins, to trust in divine mercy, but even the priests began to die. The great cathedrals of Paris, Florence, and London became tombs of echoing hymns and unburied corpses. The air inside the churches thickened with incense, smoke, and rot. Men of faith stood trembling before altars, chanting Latin verses into the void, begging for miracles that never came. When a bishop fell sick during Mass, the congregation fled screaming. When monks began burying their own brothers by the dozens, their psalms turned to silence. If God is good, people asked, why does he not spare his servants? For the first time in centuries, Europe's faith began to fracture. The plague did not discriminate. It struck the holy and the wicked alike, the young and the old, the rich and the poor. No prayer could slow it. No blessing could shield against it. The image of God as a loving protector began to fade, replaced by something colder, a silent, distant force that watched humanity suffer without intervention. And yet, in the deepest corners of despair, superstition bloomed. Flagellants appeared, bands of men and women who roamed from city to city, whipping their backs raw, chanting that only blood could earn forgiveness. Crowds gathered to watch their processions, desperate to believe in any act that might cleanse the world. Others turned to hatred, accusing minorities and strangers of angering the Almighty, burning them in acts of blind rage. Every city became a stage for madness, dressed. The church tried to control it, but its words held no weight anymore. The priests, who had preached divine order, now hid behind barricaded doors. The cross that once symbolized hope now stood in the streets like a monument to suffering. People buried their dead without rites, dug graves without prayers, and turned their eyes away from the heavens. For centuries, religion had explained everything: storms, sickness, and sin. But now there was something that shattered every answer. And as Europe drowned in fear, something even more dangerous began to spread: doubt. For the first time, people began to wonder if perhaps the heavens had always been silent, and it was only now, in the endless tolling of death bells, that they finally heard it. By 1349, Europe's faith had withered like a candle left too long in the wind. The plague had stripped away not just lives, but the certainty that life had meaning. In every church, the pews were empty. The priests who survived spoke with hollow voices, their sermons filled not with comfort but confusion. Once, people had believed suffering was sacred, a path to redemption, but now they saw only cruelty. Why did God's own servants die first? Why did the innocent children perish while tyrants lingered? These questions rotted the heart of belief more effectively than any disease. Across the continent, painters began depicting not the glory of heaven, but the terror of hell. Writers described death not as passage, but as oblivion. The concept of divine justice fractured under the weight of corpses piling in the streets. The church, desperate to restore authority, declared days of fasting, processions of prayer, and masses of forgiveness. But the people no longer listened. They had seen too much. The once holy relics that drew pilgrims now gathered dust. Those who had relied on faith turned inward, searching for answers in reason and observation. In the ruins of monasteries, a few scholars began quietly studying the world instead of preaching about it. They dissected the sick, examined the air, the rats, the filth, and in doing so, they laid the first fragile stones of modern science. Out of disbelief came discovery. Out of tragedy came transformation. The plague had broken the world's faith, but in that breaking, it had given birth to something new, the hunger to understand. The idea that perhaps the universe was not ruled by wrath, but by rules. By the time the last wave of the Black Death faded in 1353, Europe was scarred, spiritually, physically, and mentally, but no longer the same. The Church would never again hold the unquestioned power it once had. People began to think, to question, to doubt, and through that doubt, the Renaissance quietly took root. When faith died, reason was born. And though the bells no longer rang for the glory of God, they began to toll for a new kind of creation, one built not on prayer, but on the courage to ask why.